All right. So, well, first, Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you all had a lovely holiday and really excited to kick off this new year. And it's an absolute delight to be with you today. My name is Ruth Darlene, and I'm the Executive Director of Women of Silicon Valley, WomenSV for short. It's a domestic violence nonprofit that was started in Los Altos by our wonderful a founder and the executive director of Los Altos Community Foundation, now Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation, who sadly passed away last year. But Roy Lay will forever live in my heart as the person that took a chance on me and believed in me and gave me a name. He called me a social entrepreneur. And I haven't looked back since in the last 13 years of doing this work. So our focus is on educating survivors and providers and the community at large about more subtle forms of abuse that don't always leave forensic evidence behind, but they can still be dangerous nonetheless, and even life-threatening. Um, well, I'm extra excited to be with you today because February is right around the corner, and February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. So how appropriate to kick it off with a talk dedicated to that today. So teen dating violence is a problem in our country, in our county, even in our affluent area. It's not just a problem, it's an epidemic. 1 in 3 teens will experience teen dating violence. And of course, we all here know more than 3 teens, and they will go on to experience more of that kind of abuse when they get to college. So I think people know that are familiar with the statistic that 1 in 5 women will be a victim of sexual assault during their college years, but not everybody knows that 1 in 5 women will be a victim of intimate partner violence during her college years. And 1 in 3 women on the planet will be beaten, severely beaten, or raped during her lifetime. 1 in 3 women. And you know, the statistics for breast cancer are 1 in 8 women will be a victim of breast cancer during her lifetime. And we spend October dedicated to raising awareness about that epidemic. But there's less attention paid to a problem that is twice as prevalent. 1 in 8 women a victim of breast cancer, 1 in 4 women a victim of intimate partner violence. So we want to catch them early, and we want to start a conversation with them, because the earlier we can address this issue, the more effective we can be in helping teens figure out if they're in an abusive relationship and then what to do about it. Because it's not always bruises or broken bones that give you that kind of evidence. And it's the less obvious forms of uh, violence, of abuse that we will be talking about today. So I'd like to start by just sharing a little bit about my program, and then I'll go into some detail about the terms covert abuse and coercive control. That's the major focus of WomenSV. I'll talk about what it looks like in teens, then I'll suggest some strategies to address it. So that's the roadmap. That's where we're headed. Let's hope we get there. Yes, as Gabe mentioned, I was a teacher. I was an English literature teacher before becoming a state certified domestic violence advocate. I still believe in the value of education, especially when it comes to domestic violence, not just as a way of preventing it, because you can recognize these early warning signs if you've got the safari guide, because life can be a jungle, but it's also one of the most effective forms of intervention. Once once people realize that they're in an abusive relationship, then they can figure out what to do about it. They won't take it personally. They won't think that there's something wrong with them and something that they can do to make things better. It's about safety planning and planning your strategic exit. And that's what our focus is: safety planning and education. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a therapist. I do trainings for lawyers. I do trainings for therapists because they don't get a lot of training in this area. I also do trainings for court and medical staff, for Kaiser physicians, Valley Med physicians, law enforcement. I've given trainings for lots of different police departments around the country, sorry, around the county. Well, and down in Southern California for Orange County Probation Department. I have 2 coming up for the Santa Clara County Probation Department. We really love having these partnerships with our community, because it keeps us all stronger and wiser when it comes to dealing with domestic violence. I do want to acknowledge that men can be victims of intimate partner violence. And people in same-sex relationships can be victims of intimate partner violence. And I have worked with some women over the years who have been targeted by their female partners. And the dynamics are very similar across all genders, all types of relationships, all income levels, all professions, all neighborhoods. The dynamics of power and control are the same. Wherever there is a perception of a power imbalance, you get the potential to abuse that power. It's where we get the saying, you know, power corrupts power corrupts absolutely. And this is where it happens, absolutely. You're going to see me use the term, the pronoun he when I refer to perpetrator, and the pronoun she for victim of dating violence. But that I want to make sure that we're all clear that it can happen to men, to boys, and girls can be, and women can be perpetrators as well. But because if you look at the Department of Justice statistics, about 90% of victims of domestic violence are female, and the remaining 10% tend to be involved in relationships with, where the perpetrator is still a male in same-sex relationships. It doesn't rule out women as perpetrators, but my area of expertise is in serving women who are targets of this type of abuse. Please change the pronouns as you see fit as I go forward. We don't charge for our services for with the direct client services that we provide, because we believe it's every woman's right to be free and safe in her own home, and she shouldn't have to pay to exercise that right. Just like if you call the police, you don't get a bill afterwards. That's why we rely on donations to keep our program going. And we have survivors from many different backgrounds, many different races, many different religions, many different cultures, and many different ages. It's wonderful to see our support group with young women in their 20s, and then more mature women, shall we say, like me. I hope I'm mature at my age, but women in their 50s, 60s, and even their 70s, and everyone in between. So from different races, different age groups, different professions, but all united by this common experience of being trapped in a relationship with a powerful, sophisticated abuser. And that's the other focus of my program, dealing with victims of powerful, sophisticated abuse. Ooh, Kapita, I think your dog has something to say here too and agrees. Where we do our trainings, here's some examples of where I do trainings and presentations. I did trainings for Google and Google X. I've done them for their global security team, for the Americas, for Europe, for Asia. I've done them for different police departments, including our own in Los Altos. And I've been interviewed on I don't know if you remember the Megyn Kelly Today Show. And I've done lots of work with the media to raise awareness about this issue. So it's all about getting the word out. And we're really grateful for the community partners that we have too, including El Camino Hospital District that's donated generously to our program, along with the Board of Supervisors. We've had so many wonderful contributors to help support our work. So here's our mission. We're a nonprofit dedicated to empowering survivors, providers, and the community with education about covert abuse and coercive control. And that's why I really feel this sort of resonance with Challenge Team. I'm so grateful to Gay for inviting me today with her passion for education as well. So our survivors come from many different professions: engineers, doctors, professors, lawyers. Their partners come from similar professions. Their abusive partners come from similar professions: engineers, doctors, professors, lawyers, psychologists, entrepreneurs, CEOs, religious leaders, or stay-at-home parents. And it's an extra wound to the heart when you start to think that a doctor could be capable of this kind of abuse. My father was a doctor, and I've got tremendous respect for physicians. He was a wonderful man, but not all physicians abide by that first oath they take, the Hippocratic oath to first do no harm. Sometimes they weaponize that knowledge, and similarly with therapists. I have a therapist on my board, and I have great respect for him, and he's a wonderful man as well. But how horrible it is when therapists use their training to get inside their partner's head and start to convince them that there's something wrong with them, and that they are the problem. And unfortunately, a statistic from our own work, after serving over 1,400 survivors in the past 13 years, about 40% of them have experienced non-fatal strangulation. We weren't keeping track in the beginning, but it kept coming up in the course of our conversations to the point where it's one of our intake questions. And how stunning and tragic it is to say that amongst these professions, there are perpetrators who have one face in public by day and another very different one behind closed doors. We like to think that domestic violence doesn't happen in nicer neighborhoods, but the truth is we're just better at hiding it. The power and control dynamics that underlie domestic violence are the same. The abuse of power in order to control an intimate partner, but that will vary according to how much money and power and influence you have. And so it kind of makes sense, right? That the more power, the more money, the more status you have, the more influence, the more tools you have at your disposal to exercise that control and wield that power. There's also a tremendous shame and social stigma attached to abuse in our demographic when it comes to reporting domestic violence or intimate partner abuse. It's not supposed to happen here, especially if a woman is a professional and accomplished in other areas of her life. She's a physician herself. She's a therapist. She's a celebrity. How can this be happening to her? So and there's this urge to see that if there's something that she can do to fix this problem, because she's fixed so many other problems in her life. And what she may not realize is that this is not a problem that she can fix. She didn't cause it, create it. She can't control it. She can't cure it. All she can do is learn how to protect herself from it. So in our culture, think about what goes into creating a culture. It's a set of expectations, pressures, traditions. You'll go to a good school, you'll get good grades, you'll join a team, a sport, or the school band, and you'll excel at all these things. And you'll go to a good school, and you'll find a good partner, and you'll find a good house, and settle down in a good neighborhood, and live happily ever after, and keep climbing that ladder to success. Well, what about domestic violence fits any part of that picture? Speaking of pictures, here is Dr. Martin McNeil. Dr. Martin McNeil, physician, attorney, bishop in his local church. Here's his lovely, beautiful wife and his family of 8. Dr. Martin McNeil used to brag to his mistress, saying that he was able to have somebody die and make it look like they had died from natural causes. And that's exactly what happened to his wife. And he ended up being charged with murder. Committed suicide in prison. We have, let's put, if we can put everybody's speaker on mute. And so a tragic end to her beautiful life, but this one face in public, another behind closed doors. And I've had experiences myself with survivors who are married to physicians who've been told the exact same thing. So coercive control. What is coercive control? This is our focus of WomenSV. It's the more subtle forms of abuse. If you can take a look at that while I take a sip. It's a pattern of controlling, isolating, and threatening behavior. You didn't see physical abuse in any part of that. It can range from emotional abuse and sophisticated forms of gaslighting, which we'll talk about in a minute, all the way to strangulation and everything in between. So emotional, financial, legal, technological, spiritual, sexual, physical abuse, all of it is encompassed in the term coercive control, but it doesn't necessarily have to involve physical violence. And so it doesn't necessarily involve forensic evidence, which makes it harder to recognize, harder to identify, harder to report, harder to get protection around. It is a lethality risk nonetheless. And there are men on death row who brag that they never beat their wife. They say, sure, I killed her, but I never beat her. Like that's a point of pride. So coercive control is one of the top 3 lethality risks, right up there with ending the relationship and owning a gun. According to Evan Stark, who literally wrote the book on coercive control, subtitle, How Men Entrap Women in Personal Life. According to Evan Stark, coercive control is a liberty crime because it impinges on a person's fundamental human right to live in peace and safety in their personal life, in their own home, turns them into a prisoner in their own home. And I call it the ultimate form of identity theft. because it robs a person of their individual human right to not just to peace and safety, but also their sense of agency or independence or self-sufficiency, their identity, who they were before they got into this relationship. Everything about their life and who they are tends to change. They say things like, I used to have a memory. I used to be smart. I used to be in charge of the a whole department in my hospital. I used to be a branch manager of our bank, and now I'm a clerk in a different bank, and I can barely hold that job down because of everything that she's been through. So that's why I call it the ultimate form of identity theft. So we now have a law on the books about it. I'm so excited about this. In California, it's one of the few states in the country that now has a law on the books in family court about coercive control. I've been focused on this topic for 13 years, and now finally we have a law on the books about it that is grounds for a restraining order. Why? Because it interferes with a person's free will and personal liberty. Think Evan Stark. Coercive control is a liberty crime, and involving things like isolating somebody. Imagine what they do with teens. It starts early on and then progresses to the point where they end up calling me when they grow up. But I'm starting with the adults, and then we'll work back with the teens. So isolating the other party from friends or relatives or other sources of social support, depriving them of basic necessities. So one of our young ladies was had life-threatening asthma, and when she was having an asthma attack, somehow her medication went missing, and she just had an argument with her boyfriend. Go figure. So her boyfriend wouldn't let her call 911. He said, I'll drive you to the ER. He put her in the car, and he's driving all the way to the ER, driving 5 miles an hour with this eerie smile on his face. Had she died on the way there, he would have been seen as the attentive boyfriend trying to avoid or cut off the time it would take to wait for the ambulance to arrive to get his beloved girlfriend to the ER himself. But that's what it would look like on the surface. Fortunately, she made it there and got the medical attention she needed. But had she died, would you call it death by natural causes, which is well what the coroner's report could read? Or would you call it murder? That's what coercive control looks like if you dig beneath the surface. It's not all bruises and broken bones. It's about intent. It's about reading between the lines. It's about context. Oh, an argument before, somebody that is really wanting to prove that they're in command and control. And even if he didn't mean to actually end up killing her, if she had died, still, what would you call it? So controlling, regulating, or monitoring the other party's movements, communications, daily behavior, finances, financial abuse is huge. It's one of the main reasons why women end up staying in an abusive relationship, and one of the main reasons why they go back. Not because, they enjoy that life of luxury. That's not what I've found from the women that I serve. It's because they're worried about ending up homeless. Over 50% of women who end up homeless as a result of domestic violence. They're worried about having their children taken away from them, their careers attacked, their reputation destroyed. So everything comes under attack with this type of relationship. And continuing Family Code 6320 and family law, forcing her to do things she shouldn't have to do, like telling her to unfriend or unfollow any boys that are on her social media, or forcing her to send him intimate pictures of her, or preventing her from doing things that she has every right to do, like not letting her go to work after school. She's got a part-time job because it would take time away from him. Not letting her take certain classes because maybe certain AP classes because he didn't qualify for them, or doesn't want her to do better than he does, or not wanting her to try out for a team or apply to certain colleges because he may not get into them. So forcing her to sacrifice her dreams to serve his. And then just added after that was reproductive coercion. And you may have heard the term stealthing, removing a condom during intimacy. Is one example. So where does it come from? It's a learned behavior. It's a learned behavior. Sometimes they learn from what's going on at home. Sometimes it's learning from outside influences, from what's going on online. but it is a learned behavior. It can be unlearned, but with great effort and great motivation and the willingness to do self-reflection and to honestly look at what you're doing that has hurt another person and to feel that sense of empathy and remorse and have some kind of moral compass or conscience for your behavior. And all these things that I just mentioned tend to be missing in the covert abuser and the coercive controller. They're at the far end of the spectrum. We're talking about ethics, far end of the scale there. Here's the teen version of the power and control wheel. And the inside of this wheel is starting to get at what coercive control looks like. Intimidation, minimizing or denying what's been done. That's getting into gaslighting, threatening her, sexual coercion, isolating her from her friends and family, peer pressure, threatening to destroy her reputation if she leaves. Anger, emotional abuse, putting her down, calling her names, teasing her in front of others. Here's some things that they might say. Here's what a coercive controller might say to his partner. I love you so much. If you ever leave me, I will hunt you down and kill you. Now, this is overt coercive control. So I talk about that with my survivors, but I also talk about covert coercive control. We'll deal with that next. But here's in your face control. If you leave me, I will tell all your friends how crazy you are. Put this app on your phone, like Find My Friends or something, so I know where you are, or add me to it. Tell me all your passwords. No, you are not going to spend a weekend with your friends. She doesn't get to spend time away from him. No, you can't have any friends of the opposite sex on any of your social media. Or when I call you, you'd better pick up by the second ring. So that's pretty like obvious that this person is being controlled. And then not to mention the more obvious signs of physical or sexual violence, the fist to the face, the knife to the throat. We had one of our young ladies who actually, her partner snuck up behind her and stuffed a sock down her throat to suffocate her. So anything in the hands of an abuser can become a weapon, even a beach towel. We've had women who've been strangled, experienced non-fatal strangulation with the use of a beach towel. So, and death threats. I will hunt you down. I will kill you. I've been subjected to these threats myself, so I know what it feels like. We're going to talk about covert abuse in a moment, but we can't really talk about that without talking about gaslighting. And that's, you may have heard that term, getting inside somebody's head and causing them to doubt their memory, their perception of what happened, their perception of reality. Over time, start to doubt their own sanity. You might have seen the movie Gaslight with Ingrid Bergman. It's playing with somebody's mind, and you can imagine the more sophisticated you are, and let's say you're a therapist with all this training, you can get inside somebody's head, start to use this diagnostic language to diagnose your partner as bipolar or borderline, and make sure that if you go to couples counseling, you're sharing that concern with the couples counselor, so it becomes the two of them trying to fix her. So now, what does covert abuse look like? Okay, so let's take an example. She's looking at her computer, something's off. She's looking at her emails. Her partner walks into the room and she said, have you been reading my emails? And he says to her, I never touched your computer. Now, what does that mean? She's gonna, if she's just looking at it at face value, okay, I guess he's not reading my emails. But if we dig beneath the surface, oh, he didn't have to touch her laptop. He's been reading her emails by grabbing her cell phone, or he hacked into her emails remotely. So that's why nuance, context, reading between the lines, double entendres are so vital in this type of relationship. It's not just what they say, it's what they don't say. So, oh, here, let me install that software for you, not realizing that he's also putting tracking software or keystroke logging software on her device, so that even if she changes her passwords, he goes, oh, so that's her new password. Or saying things to her like, oh, I love you so much, baby. Do you love me? Prove it. Send me a picture, one that shows how much you love me. And you know what he means by that. She knows what he means by that. And she sends it. And now he's got something to hold her hostage, to use to blackmail her or to punish her, to take revenge if the relationship ends, to control her. Or starting to plant these seeds of doubt in her mind. Do you really think you're ready to try out for that team? Or, oh, you don't want to see me mad. You have no idea what I'm capable of. He doesn't have to spell it out. She gets the idea. Or she sees him do something to somebody. Like just whack his younger brother. And he starts to rewrite history afterwards saying, oh, I would never do that. I would never do that. Watch for that use of language. Sometimes they'll deny it outright, but often they'll say, oh, think, you know me, you know my character. Would I do that? I would never do that. I would never say that. Or that's not how it happened. Or telling a joke at her expense. And then afterwards, really, are you really that sensitive? Yeah. Do I have to walk on eggshells around you? Or you might want to think about talking to somebody. You've been under a lot of stress lately. So she starts to think, oh, am I being too sensitive? Am I overreacting? Is there something wrong with me? Especially if she shared some vulnerable details of her past. Is he using that to control her or make her think that she's operating out of her childhood wounds? Or he could just, whenever they have an argument, he could just take out his dad's gun if it's not locked up and start cleaning it. He doesn't have to point the gun at her. Just cleaning it is enough, given the circumstances. And she can't pick up the phone and call 911 and say, help, my boyfriend started cleaning his gun. Or the silent treatment, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, with one of my survivors for 6 months, communicating by text messages or notes on the fridge. Road rage. Somebody cuts him off in traffic, or she says something he doesn't like, he speeds up. She asks him to slow down. He stops on the highway. So what does a survivor or a domestic violence or abuse victim look like? Yes, I use the term victim as well as survivor. And why? Because not all of them survive. Everyone on this top row, Gabby, Diane, Lacey, Yardley, they did not survive. Carmen Dow, her husband, they lived in Los Gatos. Her son did not survive. They were all victims of the ultimate act of domestic violence. And I serve on the domestic violence death review team. I know what the ultimate act of domestic violence looks like. And the ones down below here, they all experienced domestic violence and coercive control, including Senator Susan Rubio, the driving force behind Family Code 6320, survivor herself. But they're so charming in the beginning. Look at this picture. Do you know who that is? That's Gabby. Not all of them survive. So what does a covert abuser look like? You can't tell by looking because they're so charming. That's charming is a word I hear over and over again. They're consummate salesmen. They lie easily. They lie often, even when they don't need to. It's like they just want to keep in practice. They lack moral compass, or conscience or remorse. Think far end of the bell curve. Yet they walk amongst us, doctors, lawyers, engineers, CEOs, celebrities, charming face in public, another very different one behind closed doors. Every single person in this hall of shame has committed domestic violence, some the ultimate act. Everyone on the top row has committed the ultimate act of domestic violence, including Dr. Martin McNeil, including president of the Rotary Club in a different state, Bob Bashara, including this college champion lacrosse player, Yardley Love's boyfriend, Scott Peterson, OJ, and Gabby Petito's boyfriend. Everybody except this fellow has committed domestic violence. And what motivates them? Things like power, money, social status, winning. The things that motivate us are like, wouldn't you say, love, connection, intimacy, sharing. But that's not the case with this type of personality. So that's why it's so important to recognize early warning signs. I'm going to be sharing these slides, and there's a lot of words on some of them, but I hope you'll go over them with the teens that you're associated with and start to help them identify things like, oh, lots of gifts and attention in the beginning, love bombing, starting to get inside her head so that she's listening to his voice, not hers, sweeping her off her feet, texting her multiple times a day. Wasn't that sweet? Doesn't he care about me? Just checking in with you, honey. How you doing? I miss you. Multiple texts. And in the beginning, it can look like love, but over time, doesn't it start to look more and more like stalking if you're with somebody like this who says, where were you? How come it took you so long to answer my text? I'm worried about you, or who was that I saw you talking to after school today? Asking for intimate images, pressure for early intimacy. The questioning that turns into grilling. Who were you talking to? Who were you with? Why did you take so long to pick up the phone? Road rage. On and on until they get more and more intense, more punishing, more threatening, and then starting to mount this smear campaign if she dares to leave him, to poison everybody else's mind against her. It's very common. And then stalking her afterwards. Do you know that over 70% of domestic violence incidents happen after the relationship ends? Why? Because she's signaling to her partner that he's losing control. And then if he does end up attacking her, it could be a social attack, verbal attack, or a physical attack, but he'll often try to spin it around and say she attacked him. That's called DARVO, deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender, and accuse her of the very thing he did, so that she ends up getting arrested and even put in jail. That's happened to some of my young women and of women of all ages. Here's some of their tactics: using technology to monitor, to surveil, a flash drive that's also a recording device, electronic locks where the code can be changed, hidden cameras in the shower fixtures, putting an Apple AirTag behind her license plate, putting a tracker on her car, buying her a phone for her birthday, only the charger has a hidden camera in it, changing her smoke detector, but installing a hidden camera in it, using a drone to terrorize her after the relationship ends. Sometimes you think your every move is being watched, because it is. And I don't think we have time to play this, well, just a little bit of it.
I'm going to show you some magic.
Except it's not Tom Cruise. That's a deep fake. That's a video. So stalking, a huge lethality risk. And the closer the relationship, the more seriously you should take the threat. That's the intimacy effect. And here's what Judith Herman says: in order to escape accountability for his crimes, the perpetrator does everything in his power to promote forgetting. If secrecy fails, the perpetrator attacks the credibility of his victim. If he cannot silence her, absolutely, he tries to make sure no one listens. More covert abuse. And so is it any wonder why they end up isolated, feeling brainwashed, beaten down, suffering from anxiety, depression, PTSD, death by 1,000 cuts? These symptoms that start in early years, in the teen years, can go on into their adult years, and where they try to do self-medication through drugs or alcohol, or thinking about suicide because it seems like the only way to escape, or having problems in school, maybe being diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, a behavioral diagnosis, when really the reason why they're having trouble paying attention in school is because of the trauma and chaos they've been through. So these are things to look for when you're working with teens. Are their grades failing? Are they missing school or showing up chronically late? Are they not even really there when they are when they do attend? Do they seem distracted, anxious, withdrawn? Are they losing contact with their friends, getting more and more isolated? Are they dropping out of activities? Are you noticing any changes in their personality? Signs of depression, anxiety, more withdrawn, losing their sense of humor, their vitality, their joie de vivre, their self-confidence? Is there any change in the way she dresses, in their makeup, her body language? Has there been weight gain, weight loss? Does she seem very nervous if she's ever keeping her partner waiting, way beyond what's normal? Is there this air of secrecy and silence about her? Now, there's no guarantees. These are indicators, but they're worth exploring. So it can be hard to start a conversation with a teen because they're more likely to confide in a peer than an adult. But if you do have a relationship, then with somebody that you're concerned about, here's some ways you can start the conversation. You can say, I'm concerned for your safety. I'm concerned it'll only get worse. You're not alone. I'm here for you. You don't deserve to be treated this way. No one does. It's not your fault. Would you like me to share some resources with you? And I have a whole bunch tagged on to the end of my presentation that I'll share with you. The more you know, the safer you'll be. That's the power of education. And one place they can start is loveisrespect.org. It's a great website, and it's set up to cater to teens and domestic violence and intimate partner abuse. Questions to ask them directly. Here's a few. Does he ever use money or gifts to control you? Is he suspicious of you, jealous? Do you feel like he blames you for everything?
Of course.
Do you feel isolated? Do you have to edit what you say for fear of setting him off? Do you spend a lot of time feeling like you're walking on eggshells? How do you feel after spending time together? When you try to give constructive feedback or try to set boundaries, does he overreact or punish you? If you ask him not to call you at 10 o'clock, because that's when you go to sleep, does he call you at 9:59 the next night? Or does he get mad at you for or say things like, oh, maybe you don't want me to call you at all? Or does he apologize and still continue to do it? That tells you a lot about this type of relationship. And if she can't set boundaries with a phone call, how is she going to set them in the bedroom? So does she end up having to hide things she said or done or cover up to avoid trouble? Is she afraid to discuss certain topics with him? Does she feel there's an imbalance of power? Does she feel like he's trying to control her? Remember, change the pronouns according to however you see fit for whatever relationship you're concerned about with a teen. Are you afraid of losing everything, your social status, your friends, if you leave? And more questions. That Jekyll and Hyde personality, walking on eggshells. Does he have access to a gun or a weapon? That's an extra lethality risk. A gun ownership in itself is not a lethality risk, but couple it with a coercive controller or a domestic violence perpetrator, then it becomes a lethality risk. And if she does decide to leave, we talked about this, over 70% of domestic violence incidents happen after leaving the perpetrator. And that's one thing that can keep her in the relationship. If she does decide to go, that's why a safety plan is super important. And Love is Respect has one on there. We have safety planning as well on our website, womensv.org. So here's some key takeaways to share with teens as we're wrapping up. If you can say these things, and again, you'll have the slides, let them know abuse is the opposite of love. Even if he says he loves you, it's also behavior that shows that he loves you. It's never your fault. You never deserve it. You never, never, never deserve to be abused. You deserve to be treated with respect always. You deserve to be loved. Love shouldn't hurt. You don't have to stay in an abusive relationship. It's hard to leave an abuser without support from friends, family, and other resources. That's why it's important for her to gather her village around her, because she may come under attack socially, if not physically, afterwards. There are lots of resources out there that can help. And something else, number 2, to take into account is people aren't always the way they appear. Look at the fairy tales that tell us that. The wolf in sheep's clothing, or grandma's clothing, Hansel and Gretel, the wicked witch. And what is that little happy house made out of? Children. That's how she makes her cookies. Or Pied Piper. There's a study in pedophilia, right? Leading the little children away from the village. People aren't always the way they appear. So bad things do happen to good people. Keeping secrets about being victimized is generally a bad idea. Asking for help is not a weakness, it's a strength. Try not to blame yourself, even if in retrospect you think you used poor judgment or made a mistake. If you did, take a number, because almost all of us have at one time or another. And remember, you're a survivor. And finally, if things are not so great at home, this too shall pass. Keep that thought alive. We can, you know what they say, keep them alive till they're 25. This too shall pass. We can learn from negative examples. Even if your home life is giving you a bad example, you can learn from that negative example that you don't want to ever make someone else suffer the way you're suffering now. You can do things differently. You can learn from other healthy adults in your life, teachers, coaches, and over time, supervisors. And we can find meaning in whatever happened to us in a way that where we can give back and help others going forward, but it'll give us even more empathy for the suffering of others because of what we have suffered and overcome. And we don't have to become the thing we fear or the thing we hate, because there's 3 different roads you can go down when you are exposed to or witnessing or experiencing domestic violence or intimate partner abuse or coercive control in your own life growing up. You can become somebody that perpetrates that kind of abuse. You can get involved with a partner that perpetrates that kind of abuse, or you can learn from that and go your own road and learn from those negative examples and choose your own destiny and become a better person, a deeper, more profound person because of the suffering you've experienced and overcome. So that's the 3rd road we hope that we can help young people choose. Because if abuse is a learned behavior, so is love. So that's the end of my, my official talk. I stay tuned for my book that's coming out called From Trauma to Triumph, a new book that'll have a lot of this information in it. I'll send my slides to you, and there'll be a survey in it. I hope you can take that survey, because it's part of holding myself accountable to my wonderful donors like El Camino Hospital and the Board of Supervisors, the people, Los Altos Community Foundation, Mountain View Community Foundation, and the town crier, everybody that's supporting my work. I do want to let them know that we're having an impact. So thank you so much for your kind attention today. I hope you can carry this conversation on far beyond the borders of our Zoom room and keep spreading the word so young people can begin to identify what early warning signs of controlling behavior look like, so they don't end up having to call me one day. So
Well, thank you very much, Ruth.